Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know I said morning first, even though it's evening where I am, but I always like to say that because I know people join us from different time zones and at different times of day if they're not watching live. So welcome to Live Well Sister. It is your girl, your host, Marcie Thomas, and I am really excited to be here with you for another episode of this wonderful show where we have an opportunity to talk about all of the things that you just saw in that opening video. And quite honestly, tonight's guest really encompasses all of those things. So when we discovered one another, we just knew that we had to come together to have this conversation. So as you come on in the room, if you don't mind, let us know where you're from or if it's your first time. As I say, this is Marcie. I'm actually coming to you from Atlanta. So I'm excited to be here with you again for another show. So this particular episode, we are going to be talking about holistic wealth. Now, in case you're wondering what in the world is holistic wealth, we're going to find out what it is this evening with our special guest, Keisha Blair. She is an award-winning best-selling author and trained economist with extensive experience in the public, private, and not-for-profit sectors. She is the founder of the Keisha Blair Institute on Holistic Wealth and is a graduate of the Executive Leadership Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. She has been featured in the New York Times, Harvard Business Review, Essence Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Real Simple, and many other publications. Blair is the host of the Holistic Wealth podcast with Keisha Blair and the Holistic Wealth segment on the nationally syndicated daily Flash TV show. So this is a busy woman who lives in Ottawa and is also a wife and a mom. So we are really excited to have her take time out and join us this evening. So welcome, Keisha.
It's great to be here, Marcie. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So first of all, congratulations on the re-release of the expanded version of your book.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So you have quite an interesting story of how you got into living this lifestyle of holistic wealth. So just for those who may not be familiar with your story, tell us a little bit about who you are and how you came to this space in your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Marcie, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And it speaks to kind of like my background and how I got started in this. So I'm a trained economist. And as you mentioned, I'd worked in different industries, different sectors. And when my husband passed away years ago, and I had to do some soul searching because of that tragedy, it led me to realize that as an economist, the way we were thinking about wealth was totally skewed and needed to be redefined and, rethought of. So, how we define wealth typically as or net worth or assets, that kind of thing. We think of material possessions, and we think of, money and our assets, because of my experience, both professional and personal, I realized that we needed to think of it more broader. I think there's a new generation of women like myself, like you and I, and so many other women around the world who've realized, especially with COVID-19, that our lives are so much more than that. Our lives are so much more than our job titles, our salaries, where we work. It's about our relationships, how we feel, how we empower each other. It's about our families. Our mental health is hugely important, our emotional well-being, our spiritual lives, and having a life purpose and meaning and honoring those values and living authentically. And that's what enables us to bounce back from these setbacks by thinking about wealth more broadly. So if I go through a tragedy, Marcie, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'll never recover because I can't, do X, Y, and Z again. But I'm thinking of my wealth as broader. I'm thinking about my identity as so much bigger than that job title or that asset. Then it helps me to bounce back quicker, and it helps me to really see my life as so much more meaningful. So I think that's so important for so many people. And that's why I've been so committed, hugely committed to getting this message out there.
Yes, yes, and thank you for sharing that. It was an article that you wrote several years ago that kind of
Hmm.
launched this whole idea after losing, a husband. You were like
Yeah.
31 at the time and just had a
Yeah.
baby, and you wrote an article that how many people saw that article? And what was the name of it for those who might not be familiar?
Right. So the name of the article was My Husband Died at Age 34. Here are 40 life lessons I learned from it. And it took a life of its own, Marcie. Over 50 million people viewed it because it was shared on so many platforms. I had friends and family calling me, telling me, oh, it's on MSN, it's on Yahoo. I had no idea that, at the time that it had taken off so broadly. And because of those lessons shared in that article, that's how we coined the phrase holistic wealth, because it encompassed everything in terms of, our relationships, having a purpose and a mission and all that I just described before.
Right, right. And I just find that it's powerful for so many reasons because grief impacts us in a lot of different ways. And the fact
Hmm.
that you were able to work through your grief, to be raising children, and yet still being able to grasp these lessons through that process, that's pretty powerful. That says a lot about who you are and just your ability to even be able to do that and then share it with the world so we can learn from those lessons. So I appreciate you for that. My
Thank you
hat
so much.
for that. So now
Yeah.
it started as the article, and of course, now we've moved into holistic wealth. In
Hmm.
looking at the book, there are actually 36 life lessons that are included in the book, an expansion of the original book from a couple years ago, where I believe there were
Hmm.
32.
Right.
And so for this one, you did incorporate some things about what happened to us during the pandemic. Why was it important for you to kind of recapture some of the things that we are dealing with as a people based upon that whole thing that we all went through collectively?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for asking me that, Marcie, because there's so many things in this expanded version, so many issues I wanted to tackle back when the first book came out in 2019. But when certain things came to a head during COVID-19, I knew I had to expand this and incorporate those burning issues deep down in my soul that I wanted to include in holistic wealth, that had to be a part of this holistic wealth framework, like anti-racism and this fleshing out of this idea of financial resilience and financial resourcefulness. So during COVID-19, many people recall, we had the riots with the George Floyd killing. We had so many different issues with race coming to the fore. And in my opinion, we can't have holistically wealthy communities if social justice is not a huge part of that. And so that was included. In addition, by this time, I had launched the Holistic Wealth podcast, and I had gleaned so much insights, from those interviews and from people taking this personal financial identity quiz that I had developed so women could know what their financial identities were. So all of those were included into this expanded version, as well as the fact that, the Institute on Holistic Wealth had been launched, and I was coaching women now through this holistic wealth framework, and they were now going into their communities to help other women with their finances and, other issues. And I wanted to really bring home the point of this holistic wealth portfolio that we all need to have, and thinking about that portfolio that we can, encapsulate all of these 36 life lessons into that, and really bring it home to readers that, this is the framework, and this is how we can formulate that portfolio. So that's why this book was so necessary, during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Now let's get into it, because there are, there's 36 lessons, but they're basically covering 4 different areas within the 36. And I'm just going to kind of hit the highlight, and then we can dig a little deeper. So one is like our intentional life purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Another is financial independence, our physical and spiritual nourishment, and then goodwill and strong relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
And then of course there are individual things within those. So let's start with intentional life purpose. Because as I was writing my notes and got to it, I was like, I saw how it all comes full circle when you go through it. But for those who haven't had a chance to read it yet. So why intentional life purpose? Why is that number one when you're trying to work towards holistic wealth?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great question. We put that front and center of the book because, as you know, Marcie, you've been through it, but chapter 1 starts with having a life well lived. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean? And that's kind of like the kickoff chapter to intentional life purpose, because I think a lot of us, would find it useful to think about what a life well lived would mean for us individually. And I know it's so easy to go throughout life and not think about this crucial question, but that's why we called it intentional life purpose. So it starts with a life well lived. And of course, we go on to like having a personal mission, which is so important. It's a crucial part of enacting that intentional life purpose, because when we identify our values, and, you mentioned the Holistic Wealth Personal Workbook when we were discussing before we started, but in the personal workbook, there's a whole chapter on identifying your values. We give you examples that you can draw from and case studies on how to craft your own personal mission statement, which I think is so crucial for us in terms of being intentional about our life purpose. And of course, we get into like goals with wisdom, which is the next chapter after that, which then, so let's say you're crafting your personal mission statement, that we want some goals underneath that, right? That aligns with the values, because I feel like for so many of us, even before COVID-19, and I've been guilty of this too, you think you want one thing in life, Marcie, right, and then you realize it's so far from what you really want. So it's so important to get in alignment with your values. Let your values drive those goals. And so that's what we're driving into an intentional life purpose. And then as you go through that, and of course, I've highlighted some other issues that are so crucial with our life purpose, like the fact that you are incomparable. Right. There's a whole chapter on the incomparable you. You don't need to look at what anybody else is doing, because your purpose is unique to you and you are incomparable. Every cell in your body, every atom that makes up you makes you incomparable. And so I know so many people get stuck, Marcie, thinking about, oh my gosh, can I do this? Can I really achieve my goals? Can I really live authentically? Can I really live the life that I want to? But you can just remember that you're already equipped, you're incomparable, and you can do it. So this part 1, the intentional life purpose, is really giving you the tools, and I weave in my personal experience throughout, so people can see that, like I'm walking the journey with you, and you can take lessons from that. But that whole chapter, and it ends with, that chapter on boundaries and boundary setting, which is so necessary for intentional life purpose, right? So it's the word no and how to really set those boundaries in life so that, we can live intentionally. And there's one that I missed out, Marcie, on, life on your terms, which
Yeah.
is, thinking about, it's a relationships chapter, but it's talking about the naysayers and toxic relationships and how that really prevents us from achieving holistic wealth. And that was actually put right up at the front for a reason, because that in and of itself can prevent so many people
Mm-hmm.
from ever, stepping forward in life to really live the way they want to. So we decided to put it right up front so that people, can take from that and see that, what, I'm not going to listen to these negative messages.
Right.
I'm not going to listen to those people who are telling me I can't do this. I can do it. So that's part one. That's intentional life purpose. And all of those chapters there are, aimed to equip readers, with some practical strategies, some practical tips that they can start with right now on
Mm-hmm.
formulating those bits and pieces that form that early stage of life purpose and really thinking about it.
Yes, and as you were talking and as I was reading, so many things came up for me, and some of the things that I wrote down. First things first, life on your terms. That
Mm-hmm.
really resonated with me because how many of us,
Yep.
and you can put it in the comments, no judgment zone here. How many of us have been in situations where we were living life on somebody else's terms?
Right.
We were making decisions based upon what somebody else said we should do, or not
Mm-hmm.
making decisions based on what somebody else says we shouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so important to really figure out who we are, learn who we are. And that's why I was saying to you, I definitely want to get the workbook, because reading it is one thing, but it's another thing to like really write all that stuff out and say, okay, are there
Yes.
ways that maybe I haven't been following and living on my own terms?
Yeah.
What is my personal mission? Do I have one? I know that I do, and I have stuff written around
Right.
in different places here, but that even came up for me recently. Just a real quick story. I have a project that I've been working on, and then I realized, does this project really work with my personal mission? And
Yeah.
I'm finding it really doesn't necessarily anymore. So I have to go to that part of setting a boundary and saying no.
Yes. Absolutely.
So all of that, just reading that was really powerful for me. And then, of course, being my incomparable self, as we all are. And
Exactly.
nobody can compare.
Absolutely.
And not to fall into the habit of, because you're a podcaster, you're a creative, I'm a creative, and in my way as well, to not like look at what somebody else is doing and comparing what we've got going on to what somebody else.
Exactly. Exactly. Because so many of us get stuck doing that, and then we never ever really achieve those goals or really set out, achieve what we really set out to do.
Mm-hmm. Or we, I don't know why this word is. No, I'm not going to use that word because it's not a nice word. It's not a bad word, but it's not a nice word. Or we downsize our dreams, what might be in us, because we're trying to do what we see somebody else doing who doesn't have that same dream or doesn't have that same goal or vision or passion. So,
exactly.
Or purpose. So yes, I thought that was really good. Next, we move into the part that a lot of people assign the term wealth to, and that's our financial independence.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about what that section is about.
Yeah, so this section is more of that personal finance money section of the book, around financial independence, which is also a critical part of holistic wealth, because that's the financial empowerment piece. And that also empowers us to live our dreams, to achieve those goals, to get out of debt, to invest, to save, all of those things that we need to do to get on solid financial footing. And even during COVID-19, we saw a lot of those issues come to the fore as there was a threat of recessions. All we heard about was recession coming. There's a recession coming. And so this part is really critical. And I expanded this section too. I mean, every single chapter was updated and expanded in this new edition. But one of the critical pieces, and I mentioned this before, was the personal financial identity. Mm-hmm. And after readers read the first edition of the book, Marcie, they came back to me and they said, oh my gosh, you mentioned this personal financial identity in the first edition, but we need more. Yes. I need to know what mine is. I need something that can tell me what my personal financial identity is. So I went to work and I came up with this quiz. and this framework that would help readers identify their personal financial identity, just in a matter of a few minutes. And so we launched that. It's on the Institute on Holistic Wealth website. It's free. It gives you your personal financial identity in a matter of minutes when you take the quiz. And now over 3,000 people have taken that quiz. And many people who I've interviewed on the Holistic Wealth podcast, because I try to get my guests to take the quiz so that we can discuss it. Most of them, if not every single one, has said, listen, this is so true of who I am. So now we have people being able to identify their personal financial identities. And I'll tell you why it's so important. It's important for self-awareness. It's important for self-advocacy so that you can advocate for yourself. Say you take the quiz and you're a minimalist, or you're a risk taker, or you're an anxious spender. Now you have those tools to communicate to people and advocate for yourself. If you're in a situation where you're being forced, or you're being influenced in a way you don't want to go, now you have those tools. And it's also critical for self-preservation, to preserve what you have and to preserve your identity and your own authenticity. So it's very important that, people take this quiz, really get to know the strengths and weaknesses of their own personal financial identity. And couples can do this too. It's hugely beneficial for couples, for partners to be able to say, well, yeah, I'm a minimalist, I'm a maximalist. How do we come together and negotiate our personal lives, our financial lives? When we have our money date nights, knowing that you're a maximalist, I'm a minimalist, how do we negotiate our finances so everybody's happy? And so it really gives us this framework to work from. And so that's a whole chapter in the book now. The other critical piece that I had mentioned earlier, Marcie, was this whole notion of financial resilience, which also, to me, in not so many, it really came to the fore during COVID-19. And to me, that financial resilience piece is critical. And so I've been telling people and I've been training people on it. And really what it means is, how well can I bounce back from a life-altering event or setback financially? So if I endure a setback that has big financial implications, how prepared am I? How financially resilient am I? And we all want to be financially resilient, because that's what it really is about. It really is about being financially resilient. And so that's a huge part of this new and expanded book, along with being financially resilient, resourceful. But, there are tools that we can put in place, like the life insurance policies, the critical illness, having an emergency savings fund, building up those different buckets that will help us to be financially resilient if and when, something happens. And we all endure setbacks. I actually train, my consultants to plan for 2 setbacks per decade. And so we can see from that how we need to be able to plan, and if we have enough. So that's a huge part of this financial independence piece. And at the end of it, you'll notice too, and as readers, go through the book, they'll notice that at the end of that part, it has like an assessment at the back in terms of building your financial independence portfolio, which I think is amazing. And of course, it all builds towards your holistic wealth portfolio. So every step that you take while going through the book leads you towards, you're building towards that holistic wealth portfolio.
Well, thank you. Yes, that part is really good as well. I like how you have, and of course, you don't want to give too much away. I did put the site up that people can go and actually take the test to figure out what theirs is. But I did find the 4 personal financial identities or money languages, because we hear about love languages all the time. Yeah, I find that quite interesting in the way that you put that. So you mentioned a couple of them, but I mean, like real short, because we really do want people to go take it and learn. But like, what is a minimalist versus say a maximalist when it comes to a financial identity?
Yeah, absolutely. So generally, in terms of minimalism, when we think of minimalism and a minimalist, we can think of someone who is, tends to be more risk averse, tends to be, the type of person who is not taking on too much debt. They tend to just spend very conservatively, and they're minimalist. They don't need a lot of things. They don't need to be, impressing other people with their money. They're very quite content in terms of, what they have, and they love to have this clean framework around their finances. And they're not very, they don't yield to outer
Right.
expectations of what their life should look like,
Right.
as opposed to like a maximalist who has that mantra, go big or go bold or go home, go big or go home, where it's like, they're the life of the party. They're the hostess with the mostest, and they want to, this is a person who really loves, right, to give and to have, and to please people around them. So the maximalist, as you can imagine, has that slogan, go big or go home. And they love to have the nice things in life. They love to have their luxuries. They love that shopping. They love that luxurious vacation, and they're willing to go all out for it. Then there's the anxious spender who, suffers from buyer's remorse a lot, and who worries about money. They tend to be very anxious. They talk about money a lot. It's always on their mind, even when they're in a state of abundance. Like, I've spoken to people who've taken the quiz, Marcie, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm an anxious spender. So much so that even when I have so much abundance around me, I'm still worried about money. I'm
Mm,
worried about losing it. I'm worried about not having enough. I'm constantly going in circles. And if I buy something, I have buyer's remorse. And this is feedback that I've been getting over the years from people who are anxious spenders. And then we have the risk takers who, think about investments all day long, and they think about, what can I invest in next, and where's my big investment coming from, and it lights them up. And so those are kind of like the four categories. And of course, I lay this out much more eloquently in the
oh
book,
yeah.
and there's so much more
I mean, but
information
that was
there.
good because I just felt, I wanted people to kind of get an idea. And, so please, I've put it up multiple times, and it is also scrolling at the bottom. Go to Institute on Holistic Wealth, and you can take the test and see where you land. And I'm going to assume that there are probably people who kind of combination. Because as I was thinking about myself or people that I know without taking the quiz yet, I'm like, might be a combination, or it might be circumstantial as
It
well.
is circumstantial. And it's so funny you said that, Marcie, because my husband said that to me today. He's like, COVID has totally made me a minimalist. Although I definitely think his hardcore personal financial identity is minimalist. But then he was saying, you know what? If I got this big windfall, I'd probably turn into a maximalist, even temporarily. So,
Right,
you know what?
right.
It's circumstantial. And you know what? Somebody asked me yesterday is, can I morph into another one? Like, can I start off? Is it possible to start off, let's say, as an anxious spender, and really improve and really improve on the weaknesses, let's say, that I've identified in myself, and then become something else in line with what I, would prefer? And I said, absolutely, that is the case. So no matter what you are, it's about really honing the strengths and really minimizing, those weak spots, those blind spots, so that you can really, maximize your personal finances and really live the way you want to live. And especially with couples, like, that's also, a huge part of,
Imagine.
yes, how couples can really align their financial goals.
Right, and it's good. And I'll just have one more thing to say about that because it is in the book, and then we can move on. But I would also think that some of these things play into your money story, like what you learned about money, your experiences growing up, what was happening in your family, things like
Mhm.
that. And whatever your money mindset is based upon the money story that you have either taught to you or that you managed to learn over the years.
Absolutely. Because so many people, I've had trained psychologists take the quiz, and they've said to me, I wish I had this years ago, because I grew up with these negative narratives, and I can identify it when I'm even taking the quiz. And now that I'm more aware of this, that I had these negative messages around money. Now I can really, really be authentic, and I can really look within myself to really transform my own money story, and really embrace my own money story authentically. So absolutely, it's so critical. It's also critical for identifying money trauma, Marcie, which is another part
Very.
of my coaching. So it's critical for those pieces, and for really transforming your relationship with money.
Yes, yes, it's so important. And it definitely falls into your ability. Holistic wealth, holistic. We know holistic means everything, but hey, let's face it, if the money is funny, if the money ain't right,
That's true.
there's a whole lot of other things that can
There's
be happening with you in your
exactly.
life. So, I mean, it definitely is what it is. I'm moving on from money, however, because I know that the book was rewritten during COVID. One of the other things, what are your thoughts on the fact that there are so many people who are changing the ways that they earn income during
That they
COVID?
can you just repeat that last part, Marcy?
Yes,
Sorry.
that people have decided since COVID and what we went through during the pandemic, that there are a lot of people who have decided to change the way they're even earning income based
Absolutely.
on that. So that plays into it as well.
It absolutely does. I think so many people realized during COVID-19 that, you know what, I've been on this hamster wheel. I have not been living the kind of life that I want to live. I didn't have any balance or harmony in my life. I want to give more to my relationships, or I want to give more to self-care, And so many people took steps, positive steps to aligning that more and to getting that balance. And of course, there's a passion economy where people are now able to make money from their skills and their hobbies and their passions. And they can do that in so many different ways through these various online platforms now. And especially when, they want to explore their more creative side. So I think people are feeling more empowered now to take steps to really reclaim their lives, to really live more holistically, Marcie, to really live more authentically, and to have that more meaningful life, whatever that means, and to earn those different, income streams,
Right.
to be financially independent. So I think that's a good step for many people to feel empowered and to feel more in control, and at the same time have that time to to be able to take care of themselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually. So that's great.
And that is also a great segue into the next section of the book, where we talk about physical and spiritual nourishment.
Yeah.
Spiritual self renewal is what you start off with in this section.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so critical, and it just goes back to what we were saying, uh, you know, Marcy, that especially during COVID-19, we saw it there play out tremendously. I remember when we were in lockdown, and
Mm-hmm.
we saw the CNN ticker about the deaths in different parts of the world and globally and in New York City and everywhere else. And it just came to the fore that we really had to take the time, so whether it's through meditation and prayer, whether it's through doing your yoga, taking a walk in nature, however you renew yourself spiritually, it's so important that we do that to renew our hope and motivation, to transform our lives, to really get focused on that mission that we spoke about in intentional life purpose. And this is so important. And of course, that physical nourishment that we also desperately need in terms of, our bodies and living healthy, and whether it's through exercise and eating nourishing meals, that's also important. And that came to the fore as well during COVID-19, when so many people were battling, illnesses, and having to really, eat well and live well. So I think that's such a critical part that we often neglect. as well. And it's often, important to remind ourselves of how important that is. And when we talk about even intuition and listening in to our intuition about what our soul is trying to tell us on a daily basis, are we tuning into that? And that's so important for life purpose as well, as I outlined throughout the book.
Yes, it definitely is. The physical, which is what you're eating, getting exercise, getting outside to get exercise, whenever you can, just maybe taking your shoes off and planting your feet on the ground to get grounded, just all sorts of things. And it shows up different ways for different people, as you said, but that is really important, and it all ties into the level of stress that we may be feeling,
Right.
and how we feel emotionally as well.
Yeah, exactly. And as you know, like our mental health, and we're in a mental health crisis right now. So that's a critical piece that we can't ignore. And the way we renew ourselves is so important. I talk about this holistic wealth bank account, the concept of a holistic wealth bank account during throughout the book. And that's also a way to frame our decision making or actions around really enriching ourselves and making deposits rather than depletions from that holistic wealth bank account. And there are very practical ways of doing that. And, tips throughout the book on what constitutes an addition to your holistic wealth bank account.
Definitely. So I love the fact that you talk about hobbies, because I
Mhm.
realized lately I have not been reading, of course, obviously,
Yeah.
but I'm gonna be honest, even with that, because I do a lot of interviews, sometimes I don't just read for pleasure. So I'm having to find
Yeah.
a way to incorporate. I mean, not that what I'm reading isn't pleasurable, let me be clear, but there's difference between reading to prepare to do something and reading just because you felt like reading.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
but I've thought about that, how I haven't done as much of that lately. Or if you look behind me, you see paintings. Those are paintings that I did. I haven't painted in so long. But,
Wow.
but having those things that are hobbies, those things that we enjoy doing, and you talk about that in the book as well. And how do
Yeah.
you how we should how we should how we should engage in having hobbies in our lives?
Yeah, because for so many of us, we've been so busy and we neglect these areas of our lives that actually are pointers to what, our true passions are. And when we neglect those, then we neglect those parts of our lives that really are so meaningful. And that's why hobbies are so important. So it's critical. You mentioned art, which can also be even therapeutic. And so many of our hobbies are therapy. When we think about, like I love writing and I love reading, that's been therapeutic for me. That's been a lifeblood, especially with what I went through with, that tragedy. So hobbies can become a lifeline to our mental and emotional well-being, and very critical for stress, relieving stress, and really honing into what our passions are. And for so many people, Marcie, as you mentioned, during COVID-19, they really tuned into that and really, found ways of even monetizing
Mm-hmm.
those hobbies and skills that they have. So it really is important that we, stay in tune with that. And it really feeds into that intentional life purpose as well, because through our hobbies, that's, an indication of where our passions really lie.
Right. And as you were saying, I was thinking that that's also a way, many times, of incorporating, your creative side and play, to
Hmm.
have play, because you think once you get to be an adult, you don't play anymore. But sometimes,
Yeah,
depending on what the hobby is, that's where the play comes in. That's where
exactly.
that play, that pleasure, that enjoyment can come in just from doing things that, that are considered quote unquote hobbies.
Exactly.
I think
Exactly.
that's great.
Yeah.
So the last section, next to last section, you talk about goodwill and strong relationships. So by goodwill and strong relationships, what are we focusing on in our holistic wealth journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So this section is so critical in terms of, relationships. And we all know, that relationships are the bedrock, the foundation of our lives. And so we can't neglect that because when we spoke about values earlier, Marcy, and
Mm,
for many of us, when we really tune into our true values, our core values, there's some form of relationship element to them, whether it's family or friends or or broader network or even networking writ large, whether it's for our business or careers. Relationships also form the core of that. And there's another chapter there too on mentorship as
yes.
another form of relationship with this, which is also critical to so many of us. So relationships are, a key aspect in terms of our resilience, in terms of how we bounce back from life altering setbacks, and it really is key to mastering the art of recovery from disruption. Or relationships really help us to achieve certain goals too. And I spoke about that in the book. And it really just ties in, to that holistic wealth portfolio and to our values and to our goals and the kinds of relationships that we also want to build. So we're not talking about just those strong ties in terms of our family members and our close friends. We're also talking about those loose ties, those people out there who are not necessarily in our inner circle, but they can help us realize certain goals that we have. And
Mhm.
they can help us, enact that life purpose that I spoke about earlier. So whether it's through networking or through relationship building of some kind, those relationships also help us live holistically wealthy. And we can see why there's some relationships that really add to that holistic wealth bank account on a day-to-day basis. And I'm sure, Marcy, as you're listening in and other people are listening in, they're like, yeah, there are certain people in our lives that we could not live without. We absolutely could not live without. And it's just it's that celebration in our lives of the fact that there's some people who just build us and like really add to our holistic wealth
Yeah.
bank account. So, it really is a reminder to us that we need to just keep nurturing those relationships, that we just need to nurture that part of our holistic wealth portfolio, keep building on that, and also think about some other relationships that we want to start nurturing, that we want to start building. So that's also a critical part of life purpose and mission, and everything just weaves in so nicely. And by the time you get to the end, you're just like, yeah, this is why this holistic wealth portfolio component is so important.
Yes, because I mean, we talk about money and finance, and it's necessary. It's very necessary for us to survive. But nobody, I don't think too many people pass away worrying about the money. They might be thinking about, I didn't spend enough time with this person or that person, or, there are other things that become more valuable at certain points in life. So I love the fact that in the book you do talk about, it is kind of a full circle. You're starting with yourself, you're working through all of these other concepts, but then it comes back to the relationships and how you relate to others in that.
Mhm.
But of course, like with mentors, I love that as well. Because to be honest, I can't say I've ever had a formal mentor. Maybe in a more informal way, but it is important to have people that I can learn from. For all of us to have someone that we can learn from, but also to be on the other side, because I
Yeah.
have been, like you mentioned, like some of the mentoring programs for children. I have done that. Yes,
Hmm. Hmm.
things of that nature. So it's important on both sides, to be a mentor and a mentee, because we have
Absolutely.
gifts, we have things that we can give, but they also have things that we can receive from others.
Absolutely. And this framework, Marcy, in terms of holistic wealth, is also a framework for longevity. Like if we look at key indicators of communities and populations who've lived longer, then all of these critical aspects that we've been discussing in holistic wealth are key to their daily lives. Like we're talking about relationships now, for instance, and studies have shown that loneliness kills.
Mhm.
And we heard about this loneliness pandemic that the World Health Organization declared during COVID-19. And what they found is that, like, seniors who lived alone, people who lived alone died on average 10 years sooner. So when we walk through this holistic wealth framework, it's also a framework for longevity. Like we're really investing in our lives, investing in ourselves and our communities so that we can have that longevity that we want. And relationships are key, key, key to that. You know, it's so funny. When I just wrote that viral article that you mentioned earlier, Marcie, you know, like one publisher said to me, the first one said to me, "Oh, you have to write a money book," and I said no. Like
Mm,
based on my experience, I could never just write this book as a money book. It has
right.
to be that holistic framework where all of these key pieces are integrated, because this is the framework that enables us to master the art of recovery from disruption. And it's not just money, it's all of these pieces that enable us to have, full, enriching lives,
Yeah.
lives where we can live up to our full potential, and, lives where we can have that longevity and healthy, meaningful lives and relationships. So this is key to all of that as well. And that's why this message is so important for so many people.
It definitely is an important message. I have learned a lot, as I mentioned. Everyone, when you go look for the book, there's the book, but then there is a workbook. If
Yeah,
the things that we've talked about, and this is just a very small piece of it, because as I mentioned, there's 36 different things, and we can't go through all of them in this time frame. But if you get the book, get the workbook, and just really give thought and work through
yeah,
some of these things and figure out, where you stand, where you might be doing really good, but there are other areas where maybe you're not doing as well, that you can learn and begin to get the skills to help you
right.
improve in those areas that require that. There's one last thing in here, and then we can start talking about how to apply holistic wealth, and then, of course, get into how people can stay in touch with you. But one of the things that really also stood out to me
Hmm.
is where you talked about a platform that represents you. And that is so important. Explain what
Hmm.
that means for those who haven't had a chance to read the book yet.
Yeah, no, it's so important. It's so funny, Marcy. That chapter is very personal for me because I remember, after I wrote the viral article and I started approaching publishers, and they're like, "Oh, you need a bigger platform, you need this to publish a book, that to publish a book." And I really thought about, platform and what it really means to have a platform that represents you with the mountain of issues that we're faced in the world today. And each of us has this responsibility to use our platform in the most authentic way to represent our values, to represent our mission, and really build our communities one community at a time. And so when I thought about platform that represents you, like I have Oprah
Yeah.
as a central figure in that, chapter. And it's because I really feel that she's built one of the best platforms of all time, one that really represents her and her values. And there's so many lessons to gain from that. But I think that, with what we went through in COVID-19, and we heard a lot about the fake news, and we heard a lot of things going on. We really have a responsibility in this world today to really represent authentically, to stand up for what we believe in. I said in this version of the book, in this new expanded version, for instance, I'm a maternal near miss survivor, and I nearly died during childbirth with my first child, and my baby also died. And a lot of Black women are faced with that. We heard about Tori Bowie's death just
Yeah.
recently. I cried today again just thinking about it, her death. And so I try to use my platform to raise and to highlight those issues. And that's what I mean about a platform that represents you. What is your personal story? What is your story of self? What are all the critical pieces that makes up your story? And how do you really use your platform to energize your mission and to connect with others in an authentic way, to build those relationships, and to advocate for your mission and to advocate for those things that you believe in because of your personal story. And so that's just one example of how I've tried to stay true to that in building a platform that represents me. I really try to stand up and to use my platform to educate, whether it's on the podcast, whether it's through my writing, through my blog, through the Institute on Holistic Wealth, to really use that in an authentic way to help others.
Thank you for sharing that. And, I feel the same way, of course, because this is my platform.
Yeah.
And, I have a few things that happen in this platform, but I just wanted to say, because even as you were talking, and I'm thinking there are some people who might be watching now or watch later and think, well, I don't have a platform. Be like, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
may not be a public platform. But we
Yes.
all have a platform. We all have people who are listening or watching or observing, what we say, what we do, does our walk match our talk, those sorts of things, no matter who you are. So
Exactly.
it's important that the platform that you have is a representation of you.
Mm-hmm.
But that can happen if you have an intentional life purpose. So that's why I'm like, I see what she did there.
Unbelievable. That's so true. Exactly. And your mission, right? And so once you've laid that out, it becomes so crystal clear that you have your walking papers, right? And you know what you're advocating towards, those advocacy pieces, what your values are, and you can genuinely have that platform that represents you.
Yes, yes. So see, I got what you did.
Absolutely. You're brilliant.
So in the last section of the book, as we prepare to wrap up, it talks about how we apply the holistic wealth portfolio, and then there's a development index. So you can just share some about that, and in that, let people know how they can get in touch with you and work with you if they want to learn more.
Absolutely. So thank you, Marcie, for mentioning the holistic wealth portfolio, which is in this new and expanded version of the book as well. And I really wanted to bring it home to readers. And so there's a diagram there that shows you the critical parts of the portfolio and why it's so important. And you mentioned, Marcie, you mentioned something really critical about, having gaps and maybe you're stronger or weaker in certain parts. And that's why it's so important to lay it all out so you can see where your weak spots are. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. Right there.
Mhm.
And you can see where you're stronger in and where you need to work some more, those parts that you need to work on. And so that's what I've been helping people do through the Institute on Holistic Wealth. I've been coaching individuals. When I wrote the first edition of the book, women came forward and they're like, we want to be certified holistic wealth consultants. I didn't even have a program. I didn't even have a course. But I kind of listened to the call and I tried to give them what they needed to go out into their communities to help others. And so we have that signature program right now where women are they're doing it through the YWC or different clubs. They're doing it through so many avenues to reach people where they are. And we also launched several other courses like the money trauma course. I mentioned money trauma earlier. We have a holistic healing course, but there's several courses there that can help. And of course, I do one-on-one coaching to help people, with just small aspects. Like, for instance, somebody came to me and she was like, I seem to be bogged down into these negative messages, this inner critic work. I really need to work on that piece. So if there's one tiny sliver that you think you need help with, there's also help where that's concerned. So that's how kind of my work through this book has evolved, Marcie. It's really taken on legs of its own. And, by women coming forward to me to tell me what they need, like I try to be reaching people where they are and so that they can impact their communities and the broader world around them through this message. And it's so important that, we have people that are able to help others with this message. And that's what we've been doing with the Institute and with the podcast. So, yeah, feel free to tune into the podcast too and to reach out through the Institute or through my website at KeishaBlair.com. I love hearing from readers and listeners, and I'm available to help.
Yes, so podcasts. Is it on particular platforms or all of the platforms, just for those who may want to know?
Yeah, sure. So it's available on all platforms. It's on Apple Podcasts, it's on Spotify, it's on Stitcher, it's on my YouTube channel as well, iHeartRadio. It's on all these different platforms. So you can tune in. It's a weekly podcast. So every week there's a new episode. And we try to take suggestions too. So feel free to reach out if you have a topic in mind or if you have a guest suggestion. We do take those as well.
Okay, so this is just me asking questions for those who, inquiring minds who want to know. So you have specialists come in, and you also bring in like maybe some of your coaching clients who are willing to share, or how, just kind of what can we expect if we listen to the podcast or when we listen
Yeah.
to the podcast?
Yeah, so I do have interviews with experts in different aspects of holistic wealth who I interview and they share their stories and journeys. And then, of course, I do solo episodes from time to time so I can dedicate some time to also teaching from the book and also teaching from my coaching practice. So it's a combination of solo episodes and guest expert interviews. But as I said, it's available weekly and it's available on all platforms. And you'll hear people also talk about their personal financial identities on it, which is so insightful to hear people talk about their financial journeys. So
Mm-hmm.
that's also a critical part.
Well, that's good. Sounds good, and can't wait to tune in and dial into everything that you have going on with that. Now, it sounds to me like you're extremely busy, but is there anything else, any other books or like programs or things that you're working on that we can be on the lookout for you above and beyond what you're doing with the Institute and talking about holistic wealth?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be launching a retreat soon, so people can look out for more information on that. I am working on additional books. Readers have come forward, and educators have come forward and said, we need a version of this for kids and teens.
That would be
There's
good.
a teens mental health crisis going on right now, and I think this message is integral for teens. Just 2 days ago, Marcie, my 14-year-old son came to me and said, my friend committed suicide.
Oh,
These are 14-year-old boys. And so I don't think people realize how important this message is for kids and teens as well, in terms of the critical aspects of holistic wealth that applies to them. So I'm working on that right now so that we can reach that group. I have teens, I have kids, so that's also very meaningful to me as a mom. So a lot of things I'm working on. And even with the Institute, we're launching a life purpose. You mentioned intentional life purpose. We're launching a life purpose coaching certification program soon that I've been working on. So lots of things in the pipeline to come. So lots of things to look out for.
all right. Well, all of your information, Keisha, has been scrolling the entire time, so I hope you all have been paying attention. Whether you want to follow her on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the YouTube channel is there, both websites, Keisha Blair, as well as the Institute on Holistic Wealth. All of those things are there, and we just ask that you follow her, keep up with everything that Keisha has going on. Grab a copy of the extended version of the book, expanded, I should say, version of Holistic Wealth. Get the workbook, work through all of that stuff, because we want you to have holistic wealth and live well.
Yes,
The two together. And the
absolutely.
things definitely do go together well. So I do thank you so much for your time, Keisha. I thank you for everyone who was watching live. Got a couple of people commenting, smiling, things like that. But I know that you got some good things out of it. And I do hope that you share this out, that you grab a copy of the book, that you go and take that inventory to see what your personal financial identity is, and then learn from there and how you can improve in that aspect, as well as all of the other things that are a part of holistic wealth. So, Keisha, I don't want you to hang up yet, because I am going to announce our next week's guest, who actually is going to talk more about money specifically. But
Wow.
I just want you to hold on for a second so I can say a proper goodbye. So just hold on for one moment. All right. So for everyone, thank you so much for joining for this special episode. I know that you got something out of it. Hopefully it was as much as I got out of it, because I love to learn, and I love it when I can determine that idea that I have of all these 7 different areas that encompass living well Keisha's areas of holistic wealth are very much in alignment. So it was wonderful to have a chance to talk to her and to really dive in a little deeper. But for next week we will be talking about finances again. Actually, that particular show is going to be at 5 o'clock instead of 8, because that's when my guest is available. And looking forward to talking to her. That is Money. The book is Money Chat by Dorothea Kelly. So she will be here with us next week at 5 o'clock. But of course, once the video goes live, you can watch it at 8 or whatever time is more convenient for you. But she will be here, and we're going to really dive into some money matters, the more nuts and bolts of the money piece specifically. So I hope that you'll be able to join us for that, either live or catch it on a replay. So until next time, and look forward to seeing you again. And please, please, please continue to live well. Take care. Bye-bye.